The story unfolds where he can see a frosty city where a newscaster urgently reporting the world's dire predicament. Earth has plunged into a relentless ice age. Global temperatures plummet at an alarming rate, showing no signs of recovery. Despite the bone-chilling frost, the newscaster implores viewers not to lose hope. Whether driven by duty or genuine optimism, he insists that the government remains committed to its people, rallying everyone to overcome this crisis. But fate intervenes cruelly. Mid-sentence, a massive airplane crashes, silencing the news crew forever. The scene shifts to a dim, frozen apartment room strewn with empty supply bags. Electricity is a distant memory. Here resides our hero, Han Feng, when a desperate knock echoes through the frosty air. Han Feng, gripping a bloodied baseball bat, cautiously approaches the door. Through the peephole, he glimpses a shivering, beautiful woman on the brink of freezing. Without hesitation, he opens the door, and despite the biting cold, blushes as he greets his crush, Hyona. Concerned for her safety, he invites her inside, unaware of the unexpected twist awaiting them. Hyona, however, has other plans. She throws herself at Han Feng, lips meeting in a passionate kiss. Time slips away as they share warmth and desire. When reality finally intrudes, Han Feng questions his own impulsiveness. But Hyona, teary-eyed and sincere, confesses her love for him. The apocalypse has revealed true feelings, and she insists they belong together. In a seductive whisper, she promises anything to prove her sincerity, igniting Han Feng's desires. Yet, just as passion flares, shadows reveal a sinister figure. Han Feng's eyes close, expecting love's embrace, but instead, a brutal blow sends him reeling. Bleeding and barely conscious, he lies on the floor. Hyona's true nature emerges. The girl he thought he knew is anything but pure-hearted. Betrayal, it seems, thrives even in the coldest of times. From the outset, their sinister plan unfolds, looting Han Feng's room, seizing every precious supply to survive the relentless cold apocalypse. Our poor hero, shivering in the dim hallway, eavesdrops on the treacherous conversation between Hyona and her accomplice. Life slips away, his body mirroring the room's icy chill. Yet, despite betraying the pure-hearted Han Feng, the audacious woman flirts shamelessly with another man right before his fading eyes. As Han Feng breathes his last, he contemplates rebirth. No more lovesick vulnerability. He vows to break free from exploitation. His departing soul glimpses a distant light, a beacon at the tunnel's end. Desperate, he reaches out, but the light morphs into crimson intensity, engulfing him. Suddenly, he awakens, drenched in sweat, as if escaping a harrowing nightmare. Perplexed, he sits on the bed, questioning reality itself. He stared at the window, wondering where the hell he was. 30 minutes later, we find him standing on the bed, dumbfounded. He continued to stare out the window, pondering his location. 30 minutes later, we see him on the balcony, basking in the warmth of the sun. He never thought he would experience such a sensation again after the ice apocalypse he endured. Confused, he checked the date and discovered it was June 28th. If his memory served him right, the apocalypse began on July 15th. He should have been dead by now, but the reality he was feeling was too vivid to be a dream. There was only one explanation for this scenario. Han Feng had been reborn. However, something was different this time. Since waking up, a red glow had surrounded his right hand. Although it appeared as though his hand was on fire, it didn't hurt or burn him. The only effect it had was a warm sensation. Dust entered his nose, causing him to sneeze. Suddenly, the red glowing light on his hand turned green, leaving him perplexed. His surprise grew as the green flame grew larger, leaving him wondering what was happening. Despite this, Han Feng felt no pain. Exhausted from overthinking, he returned to his room. He commented on how surreal the phenomenon on his hand was, stating that science couldn't explain the beams of light emanating from it. The glow expanded violently before gradually calming down and shrinking. Han Feng noted that the green light was different from the red one, as the red light was more stable. Suddenly, he felt completely drained and sat on the sofa, trying to catch his breath. He speculated that the sudden exhaustion was caused by the green flame. Convinced of this, he flailed his hand around in an attempt to extinguish the fire, but it remained unaffected. Then, an idea crossed his mind. Perhaps this was a power-up, similar to the ones he read about in manhwas. The typical storyline involves the protagonist being reborn after a gruesome death and acquiring an overwhelmingly powerful ability. Bearing this in mind, he grasps a knife and thrusts it forward. Unfortunately, the green flame remains unresponsive. It remains confined to his hand and fails to extend towards the knife. Realizing the absurdity of his actions, Han Feng scratches the back of his head while making a foolish expression. As a result of all the movement, his stomach begins to rumble. The guy just woke up and he's already engaging in bizarre behavior without even having breakfast. Our protagonist heads to the fridge, only to discover its emptiness. Man, this scene is too relatable. This is not good for him. He's starving. If he doesn't eat something soon, he'll faint. Perhaps the flame on his hand has something to do with his rapidly increasing hunger. By some stroke of luck, he notices a jar of leftover soybeans on the table. Well, it's not the most satisfying meal, considering it's just a snack. However, Han Feng is desperate. He would devour anything available to alleviate his hunger. Using his right hand, he picks up a bean and tosses it into his mouth. Just as he's about to chew, the bean explodes in his mouth. As the smoke clears, we witness a fully grown soybean crop sprouting from Han Feng's mouth. The man himself is too stunned to comprehend what's happening. As he removes the crop from his mouth, he realizes it has transformed into a fully grown soybean plant. In addition to this peculiar occurrence, the exhaustion he experienced earlier has vanished, along with the flame on his hand. Our main character takes a pod from the plant and opens it, revealing some thriving bean sprouts inside. Our hero is now certain that he has indeed traveled back in time and gained the power to aid his survival. He is now enthusiastic about exploring his newfound abilities. However, the most crucial task at hand is to prioritize stocking up on supplies for the impending ice age. The scene transitions to the bustling cityscape, with the street filled to the brim with people and heavy foot traffic. Our hero, lost in his thoughts, navigates through the crowd. As he walks, he contemplates the extent of his newfound power. He knows that the flame on his hand has two colors, red and green. While he hasn't witnessed the capabilities of the red flame yet, the green flame intensifies his heartbeat and induces fatigue as it expands or shrinks. He has also noticed its impact on soybeans. With the limited information he possesses, he fixates on his hand, unable to draw any conclusions. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him from behind. Recognizing the sweet and alluring tone, our protagonist turns around, although his expression reveals annoyance. The reason is simple. The person who called him is none other than the treacherous individual responsible for his demise during the ice apocalypse. Just like in Han Feng's previous life, this person assumes a clingy and innocent demeanor, proclaiming that the encounter must be fate. Our hero flinches upon seeing Li Huna once again, stirring up a mixture of emotions within him. For 3 long years this simp king regarded Li Huna as the goddess of his dreams, going to great lengths to bring her happiness. Despite being aware that he was simply a convenient fallback option in her eyes, Han Feng never minded. However, he never anticipated that this person he was infatuated with would be the cause of his death. Recalling the past incident, a surge of rage courses through our hero's veins, yet he chooses to maintain his composure for now. This is not the opportune moment for revenge. Securing supplies takes precedence. On the other hand, Huna desperately strives to capture his attention, leaning closer and inquiring why he appears lost in thought. Despite his anger towards her, Han Feng behaves cordially. Pretending to still possess the simp-like demeanor he had before, our protagonist acts naturally, complimenting Huna on her attractive face. Huna chuckles, playfully noting that Han Feng has become quite smooth with his advances, although she's only saying this to deceive him. With a seductive pose that highlights her beauty, she entices our hero to go shopping. Her plan is likely to extract freebies from him and use him as a walking credit card. Unfortunately for her, Han Feng has become wise after watching too many motivational YouTube shorts, especially after dying once because of her. Our boy walks past her, stating that he can't accompany her today, The audacity of his rejection leaves her utterly stunned. Her eyes widen as she is rejected by the man she considers inferior. Han Feng continues walking without looking back. In his mind, he acknowledges her effort, but knows he is no longer the foolish man he once was. The scene shifts, and we find ourselves in a bustling supermarket called Waldemar, distinct from Walmart. It is the largest and most well-stocked supermarket in the East region. However, when the Ice Age struck, this place was swiftly depleted overnight, with nobody discovering who was responsible. Our hero navigates through the supermarket, promptly filling his cart with essential supplies. His sole focus is to stock up as much as possible before the impending apocalypse. Additionally, he searches the internet for survival tips during the apocalypse. According to his findings, the most crucial items he needs are food, winter clothing, medicine, daily necessities, and fuel. However, like any other person, Han Feng encounters a significant obstacle: money. Currently, he only has 15,357 yuan in his personal wallet, which certainly won't suffice to purchase everything he needs. Han Feng reaches a dead end, unsure of how to acquire the necessary funds. Suddenly, a message notification appears, informing him that he is now eligible for a loan of up to 168,800 yuan. This gave our hero a brilliant idea, and without any hesitation, he proceeded to download all the loan applications on his phone. There are numerous ways to acquire a loan, and he has no intention of repaying them since the apocalypse is imminent. Meanwhile, we witness Hyuna seething with anger over her recent encounter with our hero. She's furious that despite Han Feng being just one of her pathetic admirers, he had the audacity to reject her. In her opinion, Han Feng is nothing but a pitiful loser who doesn't even own a car. Consequently, she resolves to never interact with him again. However, at that very moment, a luxurious car pulls up beside her, and when the driver rolls down the window, it reveals our boy, beaming with joy at his purchase. Fiona is taken aback to see Han Feng behind the wheel. Her eyes nearly pop out of their sockets as she gazes at the man she was just berating moments ago. The gold digger promptly inquires if Han Feng owns the car, to which he confirms, stating that he just bought it. He explains that his father's business is thriving in the US, so he receives some cash. The realization dawns on the bitch that Han Feng does have his uses, prompting her to revert back to her sweet and cunning demeanor towards him. With teary eyes, she begins apologizing for inviting Han Feng to go shopping earlier, claiming that she was unaware of his prior engagement. However, she admits to feeling a bit hurt by his cold behavior, assuming that he was trying to avoid her. Our hero smirks, calling Hyuna silly for entertaining such thoughts. He then tenderly grasps her chin and pulls her closer, reassuring her that he would never abandon Hyuna as she is of utmost importance to him. Hearing this, the bitch smirks, thinking that she has regained control over the gullible man. She puts on her best acting skills, expressing that Han Feng is also special to her. Consequently, she attempts to invite him for dinner and suggest watching movies together, claiming that she wants to get to know him better. Unfortunately for her, our boy doesn't hear any of her nonsense, as he has distanced himself from her. As she turns around, Hyuna observes Han Feng organizing all the items stacked in his car's trunk, stating that he will be occupied for the entire day with these supplies. Slightly annoyed by being ignored, Hyuna questions our hero about why he purchased so much stuff. Han Feng simply states that there is no particular significance to it. He just felt like doing so. He then informs her that he also bought a gift for her, causing the girl to blush with excitement. With that in mind, the bitch decides to move along, but not before expressing her anticipation for the gift he bought. As she walks away, a sinister smile forms on her face, satisfied that she has succeeded. Initially, she believed she had lost an insignificant admirer, but she is delighted that Han Feng appears as gullible as ever. On the other hand, our boy is also smiling. He doesn't want Hyuna to discover the stockpile of necessities he has, but he also doesn't want to sever his connection with her, as he intends to seek revenge. A sinister thought sprouts in the depths of our hero's mind. Once he completes all his preparations and the apocalypse unfolds, he vows that Hyuna and the man who killed him will experience the consequences of their actions. Contemplating this fills our boy with excitement. He can hardly wait for the arrival of the Ice Age. The Ice Age will commence on July 15th. The day will commence with heavy snowfall, and the temperature will plummet to minus 20 degrees Celsius, minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit for those not using the metric system. Over the following month, the temperature will gradually decrease, reaching lows of minus 70 degrees Celsius. At this point, the world will be enveloped in ice and snow, rendering outdoor activities impossible. Consequently, Han Feng is utilizing his time to prepare for the inevitable disaster. He is currently accumulating an ample supply of food to ensure his survival. All the provisions are meticulously packed and sealed to prevent his neighbors from suspecting that he's hoarding them. As for the sensitive and suspicious items, Han Feng personally moves them under the cover of darkness to avoid detection. After the apocalypse, the power grid will become highly unstable. This is where the fuel he purchased comes into play. It will be used to power the generators. He has amassed enough fuel to last at least a year. With the onset of the apocalypse, the heating system will cease to function, necessitating modifications to his house for independent heating. Additionally, he must reinforce the doors and windows to enhance his security. At this point, our MC is truly astounded by the size of his damn apartment. He has even designated a room specifically for storing additional supplies. By the time he completes his preparations, it is already the 14th of July, just one day before the temperature plummets. With only a day remaining, the main event is about to commence. He steeled himself for the impending disaster and Ice Age apocalypse. While relying solely on his accumulated supplies wouldn't suffice, he placed his trust in his ability to manipulate plants. He prayed it wouldn't fail him in his time of need. Sitting at the table, he gazed at the prepared soybeans he had grown using his unique skill. Despite its usefulness, he couldn't shake his anxiety, as he hadn't yet mastered how to activate it. Now, at the moment of truth, he opened his mouth to taste the fruits of his labor. As he savored a spoonful of beans, he hoped the taste wouldn't disappoint. Fortunately, the food he grew with his skill was indeed edible, proving his ability to produce sustenance. The next challenge was mastering his power. Aware it manifested in two colors, he still lacked control over which would appear. His experiments so far, limited to soybeans and largely accidental, had yielded results. With this in mind, he opened his fridge, eager to test if the green aura could extend to other plants as well. The scene zooms outside, and the bright daylight soon transitions into dusk. Our hero slowly opens his eyes to find himself holding a broccoli in his hand. It turns out he had passed out after attempting to use his new skills. Despite his throbbing headache, he struggles to assess the situation. It's clear that his power exacts a serious toll on his mind and body, making it impossible to use casually. Nonetheless, he feels some satisfaction in having learned something about his mysterious ability. Before blacking out, he experimented with his power on various plants. Some showed no reaction, while others, like soybeans, grew from seeds to full-grown plants in an instant. Yet, there were also hazards. Several plants exploded when exposed to Han Feng's power, transforming into light coal-like substances that could be used as fuel. This discovery relieves his worries about staying warm. Despite his attempts to refine his control by increasing his focus, such as making broccoli bloom like a bouquet, exhaustion eventually overwhelmed him, and he collapsed. The unpredictability of his power frustrates him. He's unable to discern any patterns. Nevertheless, he remains convinced that there must be underlying principles governing his ability. With only a day left before the apocalypse, he continues grappling with his mysterious power. Han Feng is troubled, twirling the broccoli he grew with his green power, lamenting his inability to detect any activation patterns. The success rate and effects of our boy's mysterious skill are far too random. Nevertheless, it's a relief that Han Feng has gained some understanding of the activation conditions. The key to his power lies significantly in his consciousness. Sitting with his legs tucked under, he began meditating, fully experiencing the sensation of his body. Gathering all his focus and peace of mind, our boy immersed himself in an imaginary journey into nature, visualizing himself completely naked. The scene resembled those spiritual journey ads, with different animals in the forest staring at him, puzzled by his intense focus. Both his body and mind merged with the natural world. Feeling he had successfully connected with nature, at least spiritually, our boy slowly opened his eyes, eager to see the result. Fortunately, his theory proved correct. The green flame on his hand began pulsating, indicating it was active but under control. Next, we see various types of meat laid out on the table, hinting that our boy is about to conduct an experiment. He gently placed his hand on the pork, hoping the green flame would react. After some time, there was no response from the meat, leading Han Feng to wonder if his power only worked on plants. Reluctant to be a vegetarian for the apocalypse, he grew impatient and tightly grasped the meat, willing his magic to affect it. His concentration was so intense that his veins bulged, yet he was disappointed when nothing happened. Reflecting on his earlier meditation, he recalled feeling two distinct sensations while attempting to activate his power. It dawned on him that he also possessed the red flame and hadn't tested it yet. Going back to meditation mode, our MC channeled his thoughts into activating the red flame. He closes his eyes and starts his mental preparation once again. Thus, the red flame burns on his hand, and it started to envelop the meat he is holding. The pork started showing bubbles on it, indicating that something is happening. And suddenly, the delicious fresh meat turned into an undistinguishable blob of flesh. It's so disgusting that the artist had to blur it for us, so we won't vomit like our hero did. Horrified by the mien, Han Feng violently tosses it to the ground, calling it disgusting. Then, his curiosity gets the better of him as he starts pressing his finger against the meat resembling chum from the chum bucket that plankton sells, wondering what happened to it. Upon picking it up, he realizes the meat reacted to the red light, though it feels as though the pork got cooked or something. Han Feng becomes a little disappointed, thinking that's all the red flame can do. However, as he stares at his hand, he senses there is much more to discover. Upon closer inspection of the massacred meat, he notices the red flame somehow disintegrated it, resulting in its hideous appearance. Suddenly, an idea strikes him as he wonders what would happen if he combined both of his powers. Thus, he grabs a handful of soybeans from the bowl and activates his other flame. In his right hand, the soybeans are enveloped in a green aura, while in his left hand, the meat is imbued with the red flame. The green light symbolizes growth, contrasting with the red light's disintegrating effect. Han Feng ponders the outcome of merging these opposing powers. He proceeds to smoosh the soybeans and meat together along with the two flames. A bright golden light begins to emanate from his hands. The result of the experiment is so impressive that it causes him to shout in amazement. The previously disgusting meat reverts to its pristine condition and actually grows bigger, expanding nearly 4 times its original size. However, the soybeans in his other hand disappear, leaving him perplexed if they merged with the meat, creating this incredible product. Han Feng carefully observes the newly enhanced meat, sniffing and scrutinizing it. There's no doubt the quality has surpassed the original. It feels and smells exactly like real meat, but somehow even fresher. Delighted by this successful experiment, steam begins to puff out of our hero's nose in excitement at the thought of repeating the process. Unfortunately, all his subsequent experiments end in failure. Han Feng slams the ground in frustration, questioning what went wrong. Despite his series of failures, he quickly gets over his tantrum and resolves not to dwell on it, deciding that he will figure it out next time. Nonetheless, he concludes that today's experiment was still productive. He can now freely activate both the green and red flames simultaneously. Han Feng grins, imagining that mastering this power will place him at the pinnacle of this apocalyptic world. He visualizes himself as a superhuman standing atop Mount Everest, albeit with his underwear worn over his pants. He jokingly wonders which superhero sports such attire, refraining from mentioning any names due to copyright issues. Then it dawns on him that the ability to procure food easily doesn't elevate him to the level of the Man of Steel. He also needs protection. As a normal human being, he is completely defenseless against thieves. Thus, Han Feng sets about cleaning up the mess he made, realizing he needs to quickly find himself a weapon before the temperature plummets. While picking up the items from the floor, he gazes out the window and sees snow falling from the sky. The onset of global freezing has begun, affecting the entire world as we know it. Although Han Feng was aware it would start on July 15th, witnessing it again feels surreal. With a clear plan in mind, he decides to venture outside to procure weapons. Knowing the temperature will drop to 45 degrees below zero within the week, he needs to acquire a gun quickly. However, living outside America means buying guns is illegal for him, and he lacks connections to smuggle one in. As he's walking by, he overhears someone saying that he is someone in construction involved in projects costing millions. An overly dressed blonde guy is seen talking to someone. His fashion sense reminds me of those teenagers in TikTok trying to impress their viewers. He tells the guy with him that he knows Lao Wang from the Zigging Lida group, claiming that he's his big brother. Our MC seems to recognize this clown. Han Feng is well familiar with the exaggerated fashion style that this guy has. Around the area, this clown is pretty popular, and everyone calls him his brother Lai. He is reputed to be in charge of contracting projects, and he seems to know everyone around here. The guy he's talking to offers him a cigarette, but Lai states that he doesn't smoke any brands other than Huazi, for they only make him cough. I'm no smoker, but I'm pretty sure this fool is just exaggerating. According to our hero, this fool doesn't have a proper job, but he always acts so busy. Despite that, his connections are the real deal. Staring at him, Han Feng wonders if he could use this idiot to get what he needs, a gun, since it is illegal to buy it directly. Our MC wonders if one of Lai's connections will be able to get him one. As such, he calls out to Brother Lai, and the guy looks at him curiously. But guy, let me just say this though. This idiot's face is irritating. Han Feng awkwardly waves at the man and gives off a forced smile. Lai asks him if they know each other. In response, our MC says that he's Han Feng, and proceed to ask the man if he doesn't remember him. Not wanting to embarrass himself, Lai pretends that he just remembered him, even though he has absolutely no clue who Han Feng really is. The fool explains that he's been too busy lately, which is why he forgot his name. After this brief introduction, our MC starts to look around suspiciously, as if checking to see if anyone is listening to their conversation, confirming that they are not being monitored. He comes near the curious Lai and whispers his agenda. The blonde man couldn't help but shout from surprise after hearing our MC demand, asking why he needs such a thing. Feeling guilty, Han Feng's gaze wandered to the side, unsure of what convincing explanation he could offer the guy. Before he could speak further, Lai made it clear that he doesn't engage in anything illegal. He admitted knowing people who could help Han Feng with his problem but cautioned against getting involved in something dangerous. Despite how annoying Lai was, he adhered to his principles. Han Feng tried to calm him down, downplaying the situation. He explained that he simply wanted a weapon for self-defense, citing concerns over someone who harbored a personal grudge against him. Han Feng's story unfolded. One day, while riding his bike to work, he encountered an old man who spat at him like a thug. Unwittingly, Han Feng became a victim as the spit landed on his face. Naturally, he confronted the old man, questioning his behavior. A heated argument escalated into a physical fight, where Han Feng ended up beating the man. As the man left, he vowed revenge, like any third-rate villain would. The next day, the guy and his goons ambushed Han Feng, leaving him battered and threatened to repeat the assault if they saw him again. Han Feng felt deeply humiliated by the incident, explaining his desire for a gun for self-defense. Lai was moved by Han Feng's story, calling the old man a nasty jerk, not for assaulting Han Feng, but for his uncivilized behavior of spitting. Han Feng was slightly annoyed that Lai sympathized more with the issue of spitting than with him being a victim, but regardless, Lai was now on board with Han Feng's situation. He reassured Han Feng by placing a hand on his shoulder, signaling his support. The guy proudly declares that he's got him covered, stating he'll make a call to his connections right now to assist with his problems. Still feeling a little guilty, our MC couldn't even look at the guy as he thanked him, knowing he had just lied his way through. Lai informed him they'd take the bus to their destination since his luxury car was being serviced today and unavailable. Han Feng remarked, assuring them he had his own car. Just then, a luxurious pickup truck nearby beeped. Surprising Lai it belonged to our MC. They sped off towards Lai's connection. Along the way, the guy couldn't help but marvel at him awesome ride, saying that, he asking how much it cost. Han Feng disclosed he bought the car for 700,000 yuan. While giving directions, the social climber began snapping selfies inside the car's luxurious interior, posting them online and complaining it was a bit uncomfortable. The scene shifted to the entertainment district with people sitting outside around a campfire, complaining about the cold. Suddenly, 3 menacing-looking men noticed someone pulling up in a luxurious car. Lai stepped out, acting self-important as ever. The goons stood up to greet him, clearly familiar with the con man. They admired Lai's fancy ride, asking how much he paid for it with exaggerated admiration. Lai didn't deny owning the car, stating he bought it for around 700 grand. Meanwhile, Han Feng, the actual owner, marveled at Lai's confident lying, amused to be standing right beside him. Inside, they were greeted by a burly man with an intimidating presence, the mafia boss. He called out Big Mouth Lai, asking why he was here so late. Nervously, Lai offered the boss a cigar, attempting to break the cold atmosphere. However, the boss had no time for small talk and instructed Lai to get straight to business. Still trembling slightly, Brother Lai informed him that our MC had come to purchase something, specifically a gun. Just looking at the man sent shivers down our MC's spine, realizing how intimidating he truly was. The boss stared at our hero intensely, puffing on his cigar casually. His overwhelming presence affirmed his authority. The man smiled, acknowledging our MC purpose. He confirmed he could easily procure a basic gun. However, he seemed disappointed, expecting Han Feng to bring him something more intriguing than a simple gun deal. The boss summoned one of his lackeys, Kingzi, who promptly produced the item from his pocket, a handgun he placed on the table, priced at 6,000. Just as everyone thought the deal was settled, Han Feng gathered his courage and stated he was actually interested in a larger, longer gun with a scope. He gestured in a circular motion with his hand, indicating what he was looking for. The boss leaned back on his couch, visibly disappointed in our MC, though he said nothing. The man's sudden change of demeanor initially scared our MC. He gulped nervously, trying to calm himself. Then, the mafia boss angrily shouted at him, asking if he was searching for a sniper rifle. Angrily, he informed Han Feng that this place wasn't a shopping mall where he could get whatever he wanted. The handgun was the best they could offer, and Han Feng could take it or leave it. At this point, Brother Lai interjected, quickly explaining our boy's situation to the boss. However, the story differed completely from what our boy had told Lai earlier. This time, his need for a gun related to his wife and an incident 5 years ago. Some time passed, and next, we saw the mafia boss visibly moved by Brother Lai's story. He repeated the same word over and over, yelling that it was disgusting. As it turned out, Lai had told the boss that Han Feng's wife had cheated on him, and none of their 3 children were his. Our MC couldn't help but flinch at how absurd Brother Lai's story seemed, thinking it was too much, even for the boss. But seeing that it seemed to be working, he kept his mouth shut, fully convinced by the tragic background story. The boss stated that arranging the sniper rifle was possible but would take a few days to procure. Hearing this made him happy, so he thanked Liu, the mafia boss, for his generosity and understanding. Liu then ordered Qianzi once again to arrange the deal, instructing him to check if a semi-automatic rifle with loaded ammo was available. Meanwhile, Brother Lai turned towards him, and while giving a thumbs up, he proudly declares that the business is done within minutes. In a surprising turn of events, the mafia boss then hands the handgun to our MC, catching him off guard. Liu reveals it as a gift and urges Han Feng to accept it. Bewildered by the gangster's generous gesture, Han Feng was momentarily lost for words as he stared at the man. After accepting the gift, he informs the mafia boss about the current weather issues. He mentions that a friend working for the government informed him that due to abnormal weather, there will soon be restrictions on purchasing supplies. It's advisable to stock up as soon as possible. The mafia boss stares at him, assessing if Han Feng is truthful. Despite the intimidating gaze, our MC remains steadfast, showing how serious he is. It seems our MC has taken a liking to this man, which is why he hints about the upcoming apocalypse so they can prepare. With that, their business with the mafia is concluded, and Liu tells them to get the hell out of their place. As they walk, Lai keeps talking about how smoothly he handled the deal. He remarks that Liu's mood is so good, he could probably ask for a cannon, and Liu would agree. Delighted, our boy thanks Lai and promises to buy him some cigars later. The blonde guy clarifies that he isn't really asking for anything in return. But if our MC insists, he only takes Huazi cigars, and just 7-8 cartons will do. While the guy kept yapping about cigars, our boy was mentally checking off his lists. He now had food, supplies, and shelter, everything set for the apocalypse. All that remained was mastering his abilities. However, lost in his thoughts, Han Feng failed to notice the ice buildup on the pavement and slipped. Our MC took a bad fall, injuring his leg in the process. Trembling with pain, he clutched his injured leg, suspecting it might be broken. He handed his keys to Brother Lai, asking him to drive to the hospital. However, Brother Lai scratched his head, admitting he didn't have a driver's license and couldn't help. Pitying him, Brother Lai carried him for a bit but found him too heavy, so they hailed a taxi instead. At the hospital reception, employees were packing up to leave. A young nurse glanced out the window, noticing the deteriorating weather. Suddenly, she received an urgent call requesting assistance due to staff shortage, needing the head nurse's help. Meanwhile, Han Feng hung his head like a scolded puppy, regretting his inattention that led to his broken leg. The doctor informed him he needed to stay for observation for an hour. Our MC was in a fix, stuck in the hospital during the early phase of the cold apocalypse, unable to prepare. In the lobby, Brother Lai bid farewell to Han Feng, explaining he had other matters to attend to. However, the kind-hearted con artist assured him he could be called any time for help. And so, our MC was left alone in the crowded and chilly hospital, overflowing with patients injured by the sudden blizzard and plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds line the hallways, a grim testament to the deteriorating conditions outside. Getting impatient, he looked around, wondering when the results would come out so he could get his medicines. His attention was diverted when an attractive woman passed by. Like any cultured man, he couldn't help but notice her. The head nurse, Jin, swiftly attended to a patient needing immediate medical attention. She checked each patient diligently and almost flawlessly. Her meticulous skills and elegant appearance painted a perfect picture. Han Feng couldn't help but be mesmerized by the beautiful scene before him. He was even more amazed to discover that this young lady had already become a head nurse at such a young age. His eyes remained fixed on the head nurse, and the more he observed her, the more captivated he became by Jin's incredible skill and kindness. Her work ethic was elegant, and her stunning face made her even more majestic. Han Feng continued to admire her, not just her appearance, but also her demeanor, thinking about how others might take advantage of her vulnerability, much like he was doing now. Suddenly, the elderly man sitting beside Han Feng called for the head nurse's attention. Being diligent as ever, Jin promptly assisted the old man, who complained of back pain and requested help. Due to the hospital's understaffing, Jin informed him she would attend to him later. Little did she know, his complaints were a ruse to sneak his smartphone under her skirt and record a video. While she's still clueless about the situation, Jin maintained her sunny disposition and acted kindly to the sleazy ball. She states that they will need to x-ray his back to make sure. Not giving a single damn about her explanation, the old fart became even more aroused. He stands up and began caressing Jin's body in the pretext of showing her where the part of his body hurts. The head nurse is visibly taken aback by this sudden gesture, so she flinches. But as it turns out, she didn't think that she's getting taken advantage of. Her only complaint is that she's ticklish around the area where the sleazeball is touching. Hearing this, the creepy old man grins, thinking that this is his chance to go even further, plus ultra. His hand started slipping down her butt, and he began groping them watermelons. Just when things are getting out of hand, an unidentified flying crutch shoots towards the sleazeball, knocking him down. The old bastard falls down to the floor with his ass first, and starts groaning from the pain. Despite being taken advantage of, Jin still showed concern for the patient. The crutch came from our boy, explaining that this is his first time using it, so he accidentally sent it flying. Han Feng reaches towards the old man's phone in the pretext of checking if it broke from the fall. The sleazeball immediately became defensive, shouting at him not to touch his phone. However, it was too late. Han Feng grabbed the phone and proceeded to check the screen. That's when he saw it. The old man had indeed been recording under the nurse's skirt. Our MC confronted the old man, ordering him to get out of the hospital before he showed anyone the video. He made it clear that he wouldn't return the phone and threatened that if he caught the man doing such a thing again, he would expose him on the internet. Not wanting to face cancellation from this new generation, the old man kept quiet, though clearly frustrated. He then sprinted out of the facility like Usain Bolt. In a sense, we could say our MC relieved his back pain by threatening him. Jin, who tended to be a bit of an airhead, was surprised to see the old man run at full speed despite complaining about his back. We couldn't blame him for feeling worried about this naive nurse. Seeing that the situation wasn't progressing, Han Feng showed her the video, revealing that the pervert had filmed under her skirt. In response, Jin casually replied that she hadn't noticed. Our MC handed her the phone, telling her she could do whatever she wanted with it, but suggested calling the cops. Jin thanked him sincerely and smiled as if nothing had happened. Then, she brought up his ankle, asking about his injury, remembering he had a broken leg. All the pain that had been masked by his determination to protect the head nurse suddenly flooded in like a burst pipe, causing him to shout in agony. In the next scene, we see the head nurse carefully attending to his injury. She had just finished mending it with gauze. Jin not only healed his injury but also his heart with her pleasing smile. Han Feng thanked the nurse for her assistance, but she insisted that she should be the one expressing gratitude. In response, our MC scolded her to be more aware of her surroundings next time. Despite his warning, the naive nurse went ahead and pulled our boy's foot towards her chest as she conversed with him. One of her subordinates then called for her attention, prompting her to bid farewell to him. Before leaving, she reminded Han Feng to come back in a week for a follow-up checkup. Our MC acknowledged this with a smile on his face and waved goodbye. Han Feng stared at her until she disappeared into the crowd, knowing that getting the follow-up checkup wouldn't be possible because of the apocalypse. He lamented the fact that this might be the last time they would see each other. As such, our MC left the hospital on crutches. The next day, the blizzard became even more severe. Buildings in the city were now covered with a thick layer of snow, and people struggled to walk the streets. All news channels were discussing the current crisis. Within the next 24 hours, all regions of the country were expected to experience heavy snow and sharp drops in temperatures. Reports from overseas correspondents indicated that temperatures were plummeting worldwide. Experts and specialists from different countries were now discussing this unexpected weather anomaly. According to their assessment, the cold snap wouldn't last long, and the weather would return to normal soon. However, they warned people to pay attention to disaster warnings and follow the arrangements of local governments. Meanwhile, we see Han Feng casually watching this terrible news while sipping a glass of wine, seemingly unconcerned about this global calamity. He scoffs at the news, dismissing the government's statements as futile attempts to prevent panic with all the misinformation they're spreading. If he hadn't died and come back to the past, he might have believed their words, but not this time. He has fully prepared himself to battle this apocalypse. His house is stocked with supplies and reinforced with a heating system. While savoring the pleasant aroma of his drink, he smiles, reassured that he has everything he needs and there's no immediate worry about survival. Then his phone starts buzzing with messages from his apartment complex, all about the current crisis, just as he expected. People are beginning to panic. One particular message catches Han Feng's attention. It states that the Ice Age apocalypse is about to begin. He flinches. This news surprises him greatly. How could anyone other than him know about the Ice Age apocalypse? Growing wary of this mysterious person, Han Feng becomes serious, feeling it's crucial to be cautious around this unknown figure. Inside the group chat, people are arguing about gathering supplies. Uncertain when the weather will return to normal, they debate over who will go to the supermarket. The residents are demanding the property manager appear and explain their situation. The agents apologize to the angry crowd, explaining their helplessness due to the severe weather. However, the people are not accepting apologies. They are hungry and desperate for food to survive. So, if the property managers won't be of much help, they demand a refund on the fees they're paying them. Among the crowd, Han Feng scoffs at everyone present. He understands that this crisis is beyond human control, making their infighting meaningless. A resident steps forward to calm everyone down, noting the severity of the snowstorm. Even if the property managers attempt to clear the snow, it will quickly accumulate again. He suggests pooling efforts to clear the snow together so they can access food outside. Predictably, some oppose this idea, arguing they pay the property managers precisely for situations like this, and shouldn't have to pitch in. The man stands firm in his suggestion. He states that it's impossible for cars to travel in these conditions, so he will ask the property managers to clear the footpath, allowing everyone to walk to the supermarket. Our MC simply watches Jiang, the man who's leading the discussion. Han Feng vaguely remembers him. In his past life, Jiang was quite lively, and as seen today, adept at rallying people together under his leadership. Then, one user interrupted the debate, dismissing all the discussion as nonsense. He remarked that anyone who wanted to go outside should just do so without troubling others. With that said, he logged out of the discussion room, showing his disinterest. Following his departure, an overly dressed character stepped forward, declaring his intention to clear the path because he had important business with his brothers outside, involving millions. Our MC immediately recognized the speaker as Brother Lai. His arrogant and con artist nature was unmistakable even online. With Brother Lai volunteering, many others followed suit, and the discussion was quickly concluded. Several users with cute avatars then raised their hands, expressing their willingness to help despite physical limitations. Soon after, another character, using a charming demeanor to garner sympathy and favor, joined in. Our MC immediately identified her as Hyuna, known for her cunning nature. Upon hearing that Hyuna would participate, her admirers quickly pledged their cooperation as well. Irritated by her, he leaves the chat. He can't help but admit that Hyuna is really adept at capturing people's hearts. Even he was a victim of her charms. Lee Hyuna then messages our boy directly, asking what he has been up to lately. She mentions that our MC told her he would contact her, so she's been waiting. The cunning fox then asks him for a favor to go get her some supplies, and proceeds to send him a seductive selfie, despite the cold. Even though he's no longer infatuated with the deceitful witch, our MC is still contemplating how to reply to her. It took him too long to reply, which annoyed Hyuna as she waited. She throws her phone on the bed and stomps on it, venting her frustration towards Han Feng. Today is the third day since it started snowing. The temperature is now -20 degrees Celsius. In the early stages of the apocalypse, they still had the central heating system running, so it wasn't too difficult. Even the internet is still up and running, so everyone is living their lives as usual. As for our MC, he was only scrolling through erotic videos to pass the time. Han Feng scoffs. It's only the second day since he's been cooped up in his apartment, and he's already bored to death. It became clear to him that the biggest threat during the apocalypse is the loneliness that accompanies it. His leg is still busted as well. Well, a broken bone needs at least a few months to completely recover, so it's no surprise. With nothing better to do, he decided to continue scrolling through random videos where he came across some news about self-recovery. After doctors had sewn up the wounds of a man who had jumped from the 15th floor, they discovered that his damaged internal organs and bones had started to regenerate. This miraculous news gave Han Feng an idea. He remembered that he had an ability that promotes growth. Activating his green flame, he placed his hand on his broken leg, wondering if there would be some kind of effect. Pouring everything he had into this experiment, he stood still and waited. However, the green flame dissipated after a moment without producing any results. Han Feng lay down on the couch, feeling a bit disappointed. He had thought that the green light would help him recover from his injury faster. Drowsiness hit him, and he fell asleep after a single yawn. As his consciousness faded, the next thing he saw was himself wearing tribal headgear while riding a mountain goat. It seemed he was traveling with a herd of goats somewhere. In this eerie ceremony, Han Feng rides at the forefront of a goat herd across a bloody red grassland. Totem poles are scattered around, and he enjoys whipping his whip all over the place. However, his enjoyment lasts only a minute before he's thrown off the goat's back into the herd, landing badly on the blood-red grass. His foot twists awkwardly with an audible crack, sending shivers of pain through him. Transitioning from the freedom of riding goats to immobility on the ground is jarring enough, worsened when a goat starts licking his broken leg. Disgusted, Han Feng tries desperately to shoo the goat away from his unfortunate injury, pushing it repeatedly until it finally retreats. The goat extends its tongue like a frog, wrapping it slimily around his leg before raising its head, dragging Han Feng along helplessly. Feeling slimy saliva running down his leg and warmth from green light wrapping around his injury, Han Feng wakes up from the bizarre nightmare involving countless goats, sweating and screaming. The dream was all too real. As he struggles to catch his breath, he wonders what caused such a chaotic dream. The answer is loud and clear. His broken right leg still emits a faint green light aura. Moreover, Han Feng feels a lightness in his limbs. He eagerly removes the bandage and steps cautiously on the floor, putting weight on his right leg. To his surprise and delight, There is no pain. Somehow, he's completely healed. Could it be that the green light aids in self-recovery? Does healing only occur during sleep? There's only one way to find out. Test it on another body part. With trembling hands, Han Feng takes his sharpest kitchen knife and slowly presses it against his other hand, mustering his resolve. He can't bear to watch as the blade pierces his flesh, drawing blood from a small cut. Without wasting a moment, Han Feng calls upon the green light to work its magic. As he witnesses the healing process firsthand, a smile spreads across his face. Now he understands. He has a real game-changer for survival in his hands. Outside the building, volunteers who diligently work together to clear the footpath are benefiting the community. Glasses Guy thanks everyone for participating in this challenging manual labor. Mr. Perfect even singles out the oldest among them, Uncle Liu, and politely apologizes for any inconvenience caused. Zhang Shuiyu truly knows how to handle any situation. Uncle Liu Guangyao just laughs and insists he didn't do much, giving credit to the Jin brothers for their hard work, especially Jin Qinwen and Jin Qinwu. While they put finishing touches, a young lady in a thick pink coat slips on the ice. The Jin brothers immediately rush to her aid, reminding her to be cautious. This young lady, Jin Jian, is a real doer, unlike Li Huna, who didn't leave her room after feigning sickness. With much still to do, the Jin brothers tell Jin Jian to call if she needs help. She assures them she'll manage. The snow is getting heavier, urging those planning to buy supplies to act swiftly. Speaking of supplies, Uncle Liu recalls something from weeks ago. He stops himself, thinking it might not be significant, but Zhang Shuyu encourages him to share. Uncle Liu mentions noticing a neighbor bringing supplies on a small truck, almost like moving houses. Zhang Shuyu thinks it's common with people moving in or renovating, but Uncle Liu sensed something more. He saw gas tanks and even a fireplace being delivered, unusual for a typical move-in. It's just a hunch, but Uncle Liu suspects they're preparing for a harsh winter. The conversation is interrupted by the Jin brothers finishing the main path clearing, allowing people to venture out. Uncle Liu promptly thanked them wholeheartedly. However, unbeknownst to everyone, there was another tenant listening in from earlier. He overheard talks about building a new house, but wasn't sure if it would happen. He hadn't prepared for winter, and his morbid interest had been piqued. This weirdo was quickly neutralized by a snowball landing on the back of his head. Wu Kuanyu was taken down a peg by Liu Yan, a gorgeous woman. The weirdo tried to argue that he had been doing everything alone, with her merely watching from the sidelines. However, Liu Yan dismissed him as an unruly child. Zhang Shuyu broke up the fight between them and announced that the main path had been cleared and was now passable. This meant the volunteers could stop shoveling and prepare to head out to the supermarket for supplies. Looking at their shopping list, it seemed the Jin brothers had a lot to buy, including items for their mom, showing they were good sons. Despite initially not wanting to share the story, Uncle Liu seemed overly curious about Zhang Shuiyu's thoughts on the tenant who had brought in a ton of supplies. Truthfully, Zhang Shuiyu wasn't too concerned about rumors. He still trusted what the government and authorities were saying, that this was just a brief snowstorm that would soon pass, requiring endurance just for a bit longer. So he wasn't too worried about those mysterious deliveries. But even if they considered the snowstorm might last, if someone in the neighborhood was hoarding resources, wouldn't that benefit everyone? Uncle Liu immediately understood what Zhang Shuyu was implying and praised him for being astute. Under the relentless snowfall, with no signs of abating, Zhang Shuyu led some of the tenants to the supermarket, ensuring everyone queued up properly. With the snow becoming heavier, they needed to try and return within 3 hours. Zhang Shuyu also expressed concern about the snowstorm's severity, questioning whether they'd even have a road to walk back on if they passed the 3-hour mark. While those brave souls ventured into the unknown and endured the harsh conditions, Han Feng lay passed out in his warm and cozy living room, drooling on himself. He would have stayed holed up on his couch indefinitely, stocked with soda and junk food to tide him over the dull day, if not for the annoying voice calling him to the door. Han Feng lazily opened his door. He wipes the sleep from his eyes and sees homeless Joe. "Sorry, Brother Li." "Well?" The smooth-talking gangster has come through once again. Han Feng is now in a state of shock. a feeling that has persisted for quite some time. Inside a large bag lies a semi-automatic rifle with a proper crosshair, exactly what Han Feng desired. This was the promised gift from Boss Liu. Brother Li agreed to deliver it after preparing in advance, allowing him to avoid the frantic city-wide search for supplies that most citizens are enduring. Han Feng was grateful to Brother Li for coming in this weather. Additionally, Brother Li shared intriguing information. Rumors were spreading about a recent incident where an unknown person had cleaned out a supermarket in the Eastern District overnight. When Boss Liu's gang cleared the snow yesterday, they found the shelves completely empty. Han Feng found this unbelievable. How could someone clean out such a large supermarket in one night? Yet, he trusted Brother Li's account. It seemed something even more unusual than in his previous life was unfolding around him. Perhaps others had gained superpowers as well. Before he could ponder further, Brother Li interrupted, advising Han Feng to wear warmer clothes and be cautious before bidding farewell. Alone again, Han Feng mulled over the strange events. He attempted to find a logical explanation for the supermarket incident, considering theories from novels and comics about individuals with superpowers who could store vast amounts of supplies in personal spaces. Could such abilities exist in reality? Given his own powers, it seemed possible. This realization unsettled him. Han Feng knew he couldn't delay. He needed to understand his powers thoroughly to develop strategies against others with superpowers. Consulting his diary, he reviewed what he knew. His powers reacted differently to various foods, with varying success rates. For instance, soybeans had a 10% success rate for growing plants, while meat had even less. Han Feng was frustrated by these limitations, struggling to grasp why his powers behaved this way. Suddenly, under the influence of the force, the soybean exploded in Han Feng's hand, releasing an unpleasant green cloud. Instead of a normal plant, our hero found himself holding a rock, just a stinky rock. This growing failure rate was beginning to frustrate him. Han Feng realized he needed to learn to use his power more effectively, and was determined to practice hard. After all, practice is the key to mastering any skill quickly. He spared no time, working diligently until late in the evening. Finally, his efforts paid off. Han Feng successfully produced a fresh, lively soybean plant with pods. However, achieving this milestone was no easy feat. He was sweating profusely, and had inadvertently turned his apartment into a sauna. But understanding a few key rules to increase success was worth it. Han Feng discovered that the duration of applying the green light energy varied depending on the nutritional value of the product. Incorrect timing resulted in failure and a burnt, stinky stone. He realized that knowing the ideal cooking interval for each product was crucial. This reminded Han Feng of something familiar, a popular music and dance online game from a decade ago, where players had to press the right buttons in rhythm at the beginning of the game. The game was known as the Han Feng game. In this game, players had to press the correct buttons at precise intervals. It was also conceivable that energy values could be likened to directions: up, down, right, and left. The energy input had to be accurate every second, and eventually, a critical point had to be reached, and the process halted. Success was achieved by performing these steps correctly, resulting in every soybean becoming a plant. Following this success with plants, Han Feng began experimenting with meat. However, meat posed different challenges compared to vegetables. Any misstep in the process would cause the meat to revert to a plant form. Nevertheless, the principles for transforming meat were expected to be similar. The first step was determining the precise energy requirements for the meat. Initially, everything seemed to proceed according to plan. However, a problem soon emerged. Just like before, the chicken leg exploded into a nasty black slurry. It appeared that mastering the handling of meat would prove more challenging and time-consuming than with plant-based foods. Time after time, Han Feng attempted and failed. Chicken legs continued to explode one after another, with no end to this series of failures in sight. Despite his patience wearing thin in moments of despair, Han Feng refused to give up. Even as snow fell heavily outside and temperatures dropped, he persisted in his efforts. The kitchen bore witness to his determination, marked by traces of his ongoing struggle. Then, finally, came the moment of truth. The last chicken leg. Our MC operated on autopilot, his face expressionless, with little hope for success. He maneuvered up and down, left and right, managing energies of red and green. To him, it resembled an overly intricate minigame, each move repeated meticulously. Any misstep meant restarting from scratch, heightening the tension to its peak. This time, Han Feng succeeded. He enlarged the chicken leg to a colossal size. With a snort of disdain, it was worth the effort, and collapsed, exhausted yet content, onto the floor. Finally, he had discovered a method to synthesize meat. Outside, the weather worsened daily. News reports declared July 17th marked the third consecutive day of snow across the country, a disaster seemingly occurring once in millennia. Authorities were actively combating the aftermath to safeguard citizens' basic needs. This was the news that greeted Han Feng the next day. He had heard such empty warnings and assurances before in his previous life, how heavy snowfall paralyzed transport, electricity, and the internet. Yet, everything would supposedly be fixed soon. They just needed to wait a bit longer. Humanitarian aid was promised for the disaster zones. The news anchor advised everyone to stay indoors unnecessarily, which was no surprise to Han Feng. Suddenly, notifications flooded his phone, all from fellow residents in his building causing a ruckus. Han Feng couldn't resist joining in. The clamor was deafening, everyone debating the morning's news. Some trusted rescuers would arrive, others prepared to fend for themselves, dismissing promises as empty. One voice stood out, an avatar questioning the naivety of those who believed the news. It was old Uncle Liu, adamant that TV reports couldn't be trusted. If the government truly had control, rescue teams would have come long ago. Instead, he heard rumors from old friends that the government was amassing an arsenal in City A, the capital, preparing for an imminent war. Upon hearing this, the room erupted into chaos. Everyone swarmed Uncle Liu, bombarding him with questions, their anxiety palpable. If what Uncle Liu said was true, were they all doomed? Han Feng read the message with a skeptical expression. What? A war is starting? The thought echoed in his mind. I feel like I've heard this before. Maybe in my past life, Han Feng mused. Returning to the chat group, Glassesman broke the silence. If Uncle Liu's prediction is accurate, we need to start taking serious precautions. Some neighbors have already run out of food because they didn't stockpile enough. Plus, there's no confirmed date for when government aid will arrive. We need to organize ourselves and help those in need, right now. To add to the tension, Glassesman suddenly raised his voice, suggesting that those with ample food should donate to support those who had run out. To set an example, he offered to start by donating half of his supplies and encouraged anyone in need to come to him. The crowd buzzed with murmurs, clearly moved by Glassesman's generosity. Sensing an opportunity, Wu Kuanyan singled out Li Hyona, pointedly asking if she intended to help. Brother Zhang was right. Everyone in our neighborhood should help each other to get through this crisis together. We can't let families starve in such cold weather. Count me in on the donations. So what about you, Li Hyona? Will you be donating too? Upon reading the message, Hyona's face twisted with anger. She cursed Wu Kuanyan under her breath, calling him a crazy bastard. Out of all the people in the chat group, why did he have to single her out? Is this because I rejected you before? Hyona wondered bitterly. With a sorrowful expression, she apologized, claiming she didn't have any spare food supplies at home. Immediately, one of her loyal followers jumped to her defense, questioning why Wu Kuanyan had singled out Hyona. She doesn't even have enough for herself, as she said. Why don't you ask someone else? Wu Kuanyan responded calmly, saying he was simply hoping everyone would come together and help out. But if they couldn't guarantee true unity among themselves, he wouldn't be donating either. His words struck a chord. After all, no one wanted to be taken advantage of. The chat fell into a heavy silence as everyone weighed their next move. Then, seconds later, a tenant broke the tension by shouting that he wished to donate. His declaration sparked a chain reaction, and soon others joined in, offering whatever they could: medicine, clothes, food, warm water, and more. Glassesman expressed his gratitude on behalf of the struggling families and suggested appointing someone to manage the growing stockpile of supplies. And just like that, the Interim Owners Committee was formed, with Glassesman at its head. This emergency committee would be responsible for organizing and distributing the donations. Han Fong couldn't help but laugh. He remembered this event from his previous life. If his memory served him right, the interim committee was nothing but a scam to seize the resources of anyone naive enough to trust them. Days passed, and they found themselves 6 days into the icy apocalypse. It was July 19th, and the temperature outside had already plummeted to minus 40 degrees. The central heating system had failed under the relentless cold. Everyone was scrambling to find ways to stay warm and maintain their body temperature. It was just like his previous life. And this was only the beginning. The situation was bound to get worse. But none of this concerned Han Fong. His heating system was robust enough to last for years. Han Fong was lost in a video game, surrounded by an assortment of snacks and drinks. A glass of refreshing Coca-Cola and a tempting slice of cake were within reach. It felt as if the harsh reality outside was nothing more than an illusion. He remained engrossed in his game until his phone suddenly rang. Answering the call, the voice on the other end introduced himself as the person in charge of Block 8. He informed Han Fong that, as the owner of apartment 1801 and a resident of Block 8, he was expected to head down to the basement parking lot to help shovel snow outside. When Han Fong arrived, he would need to sign in, just as everyone else in Block 8 had done. He listened to the instructions while leisurely sipping his drink, but the moment he heard he had to shovel snow outside, his mood soured instantly. The snow was so heavy that attempting to clear it by hand seemed almost suicidal. About 30 minutes later, Han Fong, wearing a dejected expression, arrived at the main lobby on the first floor. The only reason he agreed to join the shoveling team was to avoid any fallout with his neighbors. He wanted to minimize the chances of them discovering his secret stockpile. However, when he saw the massive snowdrift that had already sealed off the first-floor entrance, he and the others were stunned by how high the snow had piled up. All their efforts from the previous day had been in vain. Deciding to get a sense of what they were up against, they agreed to open the door first. A heavy-set man with an orange scarf called out to Han Fong for help. Though he loathed every second of it, Han Fong stepped up. On the count of 3, with considerable effort, the 3 of them managed to force the door open. As soon as they did, a massive blizzard swept through, chilling everyone to the bone. They would have gotten frostbite immediately if they hadn't been bundled in heavy clothing. The wind was so fierce that everyone had to close their eyes against it. Han Fong began shivering uncontrollably in the intense cold. Going out there could mean death or severe frostbite. Only a fool would brave those conditions to shovel snow. Just then, someone entered the room. The moment Han Fong heard the voice, he was startled, recognizing it instantly without needing to turn around. It was none other than Li Si, who walked in, calling everyone cowards. He insisted that what they needed was a strong attitude to get the job done. Han Fong couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Li Si, dressed as if it were just another typical winter day. "Don't be foolish," Han Fong warned. "The snow outside isn't something to take lightly. We should wait until the storm passes." But Li Si, true to his nature, scoffed at the suggestion. After taking a long drag from his cigarette, he dove headfirst into the snow with what he called his imposing attitude. As everyone watched, Li Si charged into the snow, leaving behind only a faint trail marking his reckless path. Less than 30 seconds later, his desperate cries for help echoed through the blizzard. 2 neighbors quickly rushed to his aid, dragging his freezing body back inside. Li Si's face was blue, and he coughed violently as they slammed the door shut behind them. Concerned, Han Fong asked if Li Si was all right, but Li Si was too shaken, shivering uncontrollably, to respond. Seeing this, Han Fong turned to the group and suggested they call it a day. They had no way of knowing when the snowstorm would stop, so he suggested they return to the building's car park to sign their attendance with the person in charge. It was clear that the current intensity of the snowstorm was beyond what manpower could handle. Inside, the tenants had gathered in the building's car park, which had become their makeshift meeting ground. Glassesman tried to calm the anxious tenants, urging them to be patient. He acknowledged that the snow had become too heavy to clear at the moment, leaving them no choice but to wait for it to lighten up before resuming their efforts. He also announced that the basement car park would serve as the collection point for their donations. Meanwhile, Han Fong, observing the commotion, wore an annoyed expression as he waited in line to sign the attendance sheet. Seeing Glassesman, he wondered if this was the same Jiang who spearheaded the interim committee, a group notorious for scamming its donors. Jiang once again thanked everyone for their contributions. Jiang went on to say that he was genuinely surprised by the outpouring of donations. He assured everyone that their generosity would make a significant difference for those in need during these hard times. Once again, Glassesman expressed gratitude on behalf of their struggling neighbors. This brought smiles all around as everyone began to believe that things would go smoothly from here on out. They exchanged compliments, with some remarking that helping each other was the right thing to do. They agreed that as long as they stayed united, they could get through this crisis. Hearing this, Han Fong sighed with a hint of sarcasm. Silently, he thought to himself, just wait and see. The snow showed no signs of stopping, and soon they would regret their actions. After signing in, Lizzie, still shivering, told Han Fong he was heading upstairs. Han Fong nodded in understanding, but just then, a familiar figure caught his attention. It was head nurse Jean, who was busy maneuvering through the crowd with a few boxes in her arms. As she tried to make her way through, someone accidentally pushed her, causing her to stumble. Fortunately, Han Fong was quick enough to catch her before she fell. Nurse Jean opened her eyes in surprise and immediately recognized Han Fong. Her first question was about his leg. "Has your leg already healed?" she asked. Caught off guard, Han Fong quickly let go of her and, gesturing vaguely, came up with an excuse on the spot. He claimed he had an incredible recovery speed since childhood, so a broken ankle was nothing to him. He had recovered in just a few days. Hearing this, Nurse Jean, innocent and gullible, despite her position, believed him instantly. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she exclaimed how amazing his recovery was. Han Fong offered to carry the boxes for Nurse Jean, but she initially declined, mentioning that they were very heavy. "Don't worry. I'm strong and capable," Han Fong assured her. "Consider this a thank you for helping me with my bandages at the hospital." Relenting, Nurse Jean handed the boxes over to him. The moment she did, Han Fong nearly buckled under their weight. They were indeed very heavy. Curious, Han Fong asked what was inside the boxes. Nurse Jean replied that they were mainly medical supplies she was donating to the committee. Noticing that Han Fong was struggling to walk, Nurse Jean, with a warm smile, offered to take the boxes back. "They seem a bit heavy for you," she said. But Han Fong brushed it off, claiming, "It doesn't feel like I'm carrying anything at all, so it's fine." Nurse Jean chuckled. "I might look small, but I'm actually stronger than most guys. You don't have to push yourself too hard just to help me." Intrigued, Han Fong asked if she had always been strong since childhood. Nurse Jean's expression turned sad for a moment as she recalled something. But seeing Han Fong's curious gaze, she decided against sharing and apologized, saying, "It's nothing serious. Just something I can't really explain." At that moment, Nurse Jean realized she had never asked for Han Fong's name. "Han Fong," he said, introducing himself. Hearing this, she smiled and replied, "I'm Jean Shui. It's a pleasure to meet you." Seeing Jean Shui's radiant smile, Han Fong blushed like a cherry tomato. Jean then asked, "What do you do for a living, Han Fong?" "Oh, about that. I'm unemployed," he admitted. Jean Shui looked a little surprised, prompting Han Fong to ask, "What's so surprising about being unemployed?" Before she could respond, someone accidentally bumped into Jean Shui from behind, causing her to stumble and crash into Han Fong. Her chest was the first thing to make contact. As Han Fong felt the softness of Jean Shui's chest, his eyes widened in surprise, staring at them with undivided attention. Jianshu quickly stepped back, apologizing as usual. Han Fong reassured her that it was fine. It wasn't her fault. Unbeknownst to them, Hyuna was passing by and immediately spotted Han Fong. Seeing a potential threat, she called out, asking why she hadn't been informed that Han Fong was at the car park. Without hesitation, Hyuna rushed over, grabbing Han Fong's arm to take control of the situation. She then deliberately pressed her arm against her 38D chest, unaware that she was outmatched in that regard. Hyuna looked at Han Fong and asked if Jianshu was his friend. At that moment, before Han Fong could say anything, Jianshu had already reclaimed her boxes and was leaving with a flushed, embarrassed expression, as if she had been caught doing something she shouldn't. She told the two to continue their conversation while she headed to the committee station, insisting that there was no need to disturb Han Fong any further. Jianshu thanked him and mentioned that she could manage the boxes on her own from there. With her hasty words, Han Fong could only respond with an okay. Jianshu hurried out as if there were a fire drill. Watching Jianshu's swift departure, Han Fong turned to Hyuna and asked why she had come over to interrupt them. Hearing this, Hyuna feigned a bright smile and replied that she just wanted to say hello. She had only come to the car park to collect supplies, but upon seeing Han Fong, she wanted to ask why he hadn't contacted her as promised. I became very worried that something might have happened to you, she said. Han Fong awkwardly scratched the back of his neck and smiled nervously, claiming he was just about to send Hyuna a message. Hyuna immediately called him out on his lie, pointing out that she had just seen him chatting happily with Jianshu. With a pleading gesture and a warm smile, she asked Han Fong if he had any spare food supplies in his apartment. She was almost out of food and could really use some help. Han Fong's smirk widened upon hearing this. He admitted that while he didn't have much food left, he was willing to share. However, he reminded Hyuna that she still hadn't replied to his message from a few days ago. So, how about it? Want to come over to my place and keep me company for a few days? Han Fong asked with a smug look. Hyuna was taken aback by his newfound boldness. After getting over her initial shock, she told Han Fong she didn't quite understand his meaning at that time. However, if he wanted to chat, he could do so online. Han Fong, sensing her reluctance, decided not to press the issue further and began to leave, saying that it seemed Hyuna wasn't on board with the idea, and that he was heading back to his apartment. Hyona's face darkened at his response, but realizing Han Fong was serious, she quickly grabbed his jacket and asked him to wait. She continued, expressing that she felt Han Fong had changed recently. Did he doubt her feelings for him? She had always been sincere, and she didn't want anyone to think she was with him just for his wealth. Could he give her a little more time? Hyuna asked this, with her trademark cute, pitiful face, the one that usually swayed others. Han Fong, knowing exactly what she was trying to do, pondered his response. If he hadn't already died once, he might have believed her. Han Fong was tempted to rip off Hyona's mask of pretense and be done with her. It would be so easy, but he knew it would be unsatisfying. Plus, he needed to find out who was behind her. Wait, why should he even bother? At that moment, Han Fong had a sudden, brilliant idea. He realized he only needed to replicate his previous strategy, and Hyuna would inevitably bring her boyfriend back into the picture. All he had to do was wait and prepare. So, Han Fong shifted his approach. He told Hyuna he had been teasing her, which startled her briefly. He then grabbed her arms and reassured her that he was just joking and waiting for her reply. He promised to deliver some food supplies by the next day. Hyuna, pleased with this development, praised Han Fong, calling him the best. She quickly made her exit, satisfied that she had achieved her goal. Waving goodbye, she told Han Fong she was heading back and suggested that if he wanted to discuss anything else, he could do so online. Han Fong waved back and wished her well. As Hyuna left, she couldn't help but smile mischievously, pleased with herself. Han Fong mirrored her smile, watching her retreating figure. The next 2 days dragged by slowly, with the snowstorm outside growing worse each day. But Han Fong was indifferent to the weather. Inside his apartment, Hyona's phone calls and messages bombarded him. She repeatedly asked about the food supplies and why he wasn't responding. The messages kept flooding in. Han Fong, however, paid no attention to Hyona's messages. Before him was a delicious homemade dish, and with each bite, he was in cloud nine, savoring the taste. The meal was blissfully perfect, a warm comfort against the weather outside. As he enjoyed his meal, Han Fong reflected on his recent experiments. He had confirmed two key findings. First, meat could not be grown indefinitely. It had a natural limit beyond which it could not expand. No matter how many attempts he made, he couldn't increase the size of a piece of meat beyond its current limit. However, his experiments revealed something intriguing. A workaround that could allow for infinite growth of meat, but only if certain criteria were met. Holding a piece of meat with chopsticks, Han Fong explained his new method. He would use half of the harvested soybeans to grow new seedlings while consuming the other half, ensuring a continuous supply of soybeans. He had now discovered a similar process for meat. By cutting the meat into two pieces and allowing each piece to grow back to its original size, he could achieve an infinite supply. Under specific lighting conditions, half a piece of steak with a few soybeans could produce a full steak. With this realization, Han Fong conducted numerous successful tests, compounding the effect. Using this formula, he would never have to worry about running out of supplies or having nothing to eat. Feeling proud, content with his newfound solution. Meanwhile, on his television, a news reporter was downplaying the severity of the situation. It was August 2nd, the 19th day of the snowstorm, and the reporter was broadcasting from Bodu-Hethi Island in the Maldives, just 78 kilometers from the equator. The average temperature there had plummeted to -42 degrees. The entire island was nearly buried under ice and snow, with the ocean freezing at a visibly rapid pace. According to expert readings, the ice layer had already reached a depth of 55 centimeters. The report confirmed that this catastrophic situation was consistent across the globe. Han Fong, meanwhile, remained in his warm and comforting apartment, enjoying a glass of red wine and his usual relaxed attire. He laughed internally, well aware that the reality was far graver than the media's portrayal. Suddenly, a shockwave jolted him, resembling a massive earthquake. His glass of wine shook and spilled its contents. Han Fong quickly moved to his window and drew back the curtain to see outside. What he saw was chaos. An explosion had rocked the city, marking the 7th in the past few days. His curiosity was piqued by the unfolding events. Fortified like a turtle shell, Han Fong wasn't concerned about his safety. Just then, a loud vibrating noise startled him. Peering through the window, he saw several military helicopters hovering in the sky. He was both surprised and intrigued, having never seen so many military helicopters at once. "Damn, that's a lot of helicopters," he muttered. He pulled the curtain back and checked the homeowners' chat group on his phone, anticipating a flurry of activity. His expectations were met. In the underground parking lot, homeowners were frantically trading for essential goods and food supplies. Many took advantage of the situation, leading to several conflicts. Even those who had previously donated supplies were now facing similar issues. At that moment, Glasses Man and a few others from the Interim Owners Committee arrived. He announced to everyone that any resident facing difficulties should head to their station in the underground parking lot to receive necessary resources for free. Meanwhile, Han Fong had also made his way back to the basement parking lot. Accustomed to the comfort of his apartment, he was unprepared for the harsh weather outside. Despite wearing heavy clothing, Han Fong shivered in the cold and sneezed heavily from time to time. It was far too cold for him. Han Fong thought that if it weren't for gathering information, he wouldn't have ventured back to the basement car park. As he walked further, he saw several homeowners waiting impatiently in a queue for supplies. Han Fong was surprised to see that the Interim Owners Committee was distributing food supplies to the residents. In his previous life, this had not happened, and there had been a rebellion in the neighborhood. If Han Feng's memory served him right, it was indeed due to the committee's actions. But this time, they were giving away resources instead of scamming people. This indicated that some aspect of the future had changed, and Han Feng wondered what was going on. Since gathering information was his primary reason for coming down there, he decided to uncover the real situation first. The panel showed a view of the chaotic distribution area from above, with people gathered around piles of supplies. As Han Feng walked through the crowded area in the underground parking lot, he noticed that the number of residents facing difficulties was quite high, suggesting that the committee had received more donations than in his previous life. From afar, he watched the distribution point, where a person in line angrily shouted that he had handed over several boxes of supplies at the beginning. Now, he had only received a small amount of food. In a polite tone, Glasses Man explained that everyone was given the same share. The fat man in glasses was not having it. Frustrated, he held out the small amount of supplies in his hand and demanded that Glasses Man return the resources he had donated. Jiang maintained his polite demeanor, smiled, and apologized, explaining that the resources could not be returned due to the ongoing disaster. He hoped the man could see the bigger picture, and promised to compensate him several times over in cash once the disaster was over. This frustrated the fat man even more. He argued that no one knew how long the snowstorm would last, and that he just wanted his supplies back. At this point, the crowd reacted to his outburst, telling him to stop causing a scene. Their leader, Zhang, had already promised compensation once everything returned to normal, so why was he still complaining? They accused him of being shameless and suggested he had never actually donated, only trying to get more resources. The crowd grew more agitated, and someone yelled for him to take his share and leave since everyone else was waiting for their turn. Another voice told him not to embarrass himself, because supplies already distributed wouldn't be returned. They reminded him that the committee was struggling and wondered why he was being such a nuisance. He should get lost. Han Feng observed the scene with a slight smirk. He knew there was no way the committee would let anyone take the supplies back, given the current situation. Those who placed themselves on a moral high ground and criticized others, who donated more, truly had no shame. Just then, someone beside Han Feng spoke up, unknowingly echoing his thoughts. "The crowd is really shameless," the voice said, surprising Han Feng. It was none other than Li Zi. With a tired expression, Li Zi raised his hand and greeted Han Feng. He looked as though he hadn't eaten in days. Han Feng responded with a smile, remarking how long it had been since they last saw each other. "How have you been?" "Not too bad. Not too bad at all," Li Zi replied with a forced smile, mentioning that he was still surviving. However, as he began to shake profusely, Li Zi blamed his trembling on feeling flustered and powerless. Han Feng asked if his current situation was what he referred to as not bad. Li Zi explained that he had been surviving on water and minimal food for the past few days, so it had been a bit difficult, to be honest. At that moment, his stomach grumbled loudly. Han Feng asked in shock if Li Zi really had no food left at this point. "Yes," Li Zi replied. He told Han Feng that he had tried to help his poor neighbors earlier by donating most of his supplies to the committee. But in the end, his food supplies at home ran out before the snowstorm ended, and the resources the committee was giving out were very little. Li Zi continued that if he had known, he would have kept more resources for himself. Now, even if he made a scene to ask for his supplies back, everyone present would start making a fuss about it. Han Feng listened to Li Zi curiously. Then, with a sly grin, he called out to him. Han Feng put his right arm around Li Zi and asked if he could help him with something. Li Zi, with a curious look, nodded, wondering what it was. "What favor are you asking for?" Li Zi asked. Han Feng explained that if Li Zi did what he was about to ask, he would give him 4 packs of instant noodles in return. Li Zi was shocked, especially after hearing Han Feng's request. He asked if Han Feng was really telling the truth. Han Feng nodded. "Of course," he said. "Don't think too much about it. I don't have much left in stock, but I can give you that much." Li Zi started crying. thanking Han Fong and promising never to forget his kindness. He realized that his dear brother was just looking for an excuse to give him food. Han Fong reassured him, saying there was no need to be so polite. They were brothers, and no courtesy was needed. Li Zi grabbed Han Fong's shoulder, reassuring him not to worry. Still crying with joy, Li Zi promised that fulfilling the small request was no trouble at all. Han Fong thanked him, and mentioned that he could visit his house later to collect the food. Li Zi happily agreed and bid farewell, saying he would first collect his share of the resources being distributed. With that, he left, a smile on his face and hope in his heart. But anyway, Han Fong thought to himself that with a few packs of instant noodles and sausages, he would no longer need to come to the underground parking lot to gather information. Though he felt a bit guilty about taking advantage of Li Zi, it wasn't as important as being comfortable at home, eating good food, and playing video games. However, at that precise moment, someone loudly called his name, catching his attention. As he turned, a flying slap struck him hard. The woman in the red coat was none other than Li Hyuna. Han Fong was taken aback, wondering what had happened. Hyuna expressed her disappointment in him, loudly declaring that he had royally let her down. The scene was loud enough to draw the attention of everyone present. Hyuna shouted, asking why her bootlicker hadn't been replying to her messages. Han Fong was still in a daze, shocked that Hyuna had just slapped him. Did she really just slap me? With a murderous look in his eyes, Han Fong placed a hand on his red cheek as he stared at Hyuna. This woman dared to slap me? I haven't even settled her previous debts yet, and she has the audacity to slap me for no reason. Did she think I'm that easy to bully? A bootlicker? Han Fong remained silent and tried his best to stay calm as Hyuna continued to shout at him. She questioned whether Han Fong was deaf or mute, wondering if he hadn't heard that his goddess was talking to him. After a brief moment, Han Fong sighed heavily and apologized to Hyuna. He decided to think of the bigger picture. He didn't want to ruin his plan before it even started. Han Fong explained to Hyuna that an unexpected situation had occurred, a complication that made him unable to deliver the supplies he promised. Hyuna was shocked to learn that the supplies had been stolen. Han Fong explained that he had placed the supplies outside his door and went back inside his apartment to get his keys. But when he came back out, they were gone. Hyuna then asked if Han Fong had searched for them. Yes, he said. I did search, but unfortunately, I couldn't find any clues at all. Hyuna proceeded to ask if Han Fong still had some supplies left. Han Fong replied that he didn't have much. His current supplies would probably last him a few days if he ate only one meal a day. Hyuna only heard the portion she was interested in and got excited, exclaiming that it was great news. At that moment, her expression was like that of a soul devourer. Her eyes were empty, like a bottomless abyss, caring about nothing and no one other than herself. She told Han Fong he could split his resources in half and share them with her. That way, they could both get through the disaster together. He just needed to eat one meal every 2 days, and he would be fine. Hearing this, Han Fong was speechless. He couldn't even begin to imagine how shameless Hyuna was to say such words. Then, as a sly grin formed on his lips, he remembered. Oh, that's right. In her eyes, I am just a tool for her to use when needed. Her worthless bootlicker, Han Fong thought. He agreed to Hyuna's request, saying that he did promise her after all. They would split his resources equally. Hyuna immediately started playing nice, thanking Han Fong. She told him to deliver the supplies to her apartment, as she would be waiting outside her door. Han Fong agreed, adding that they should do it at night and that he would send her a message when he was done packing. Satisfied, Hyuna turned to leave, reminding Han Fong to send his message. She also told him to head back soon so he didn't catch a flu since he needed to be able to deliver the supplies. Sure, wait for me tonight, Han Fong replied with a wave of his hand. Outside, the snowstorm continued to worsen. Meanwhile, back inside, Hyuna was blowing up Han Fong's phone. As before, Han Fong was neither replying to her messages nor picking up her calls. She waited impatiently by her door, wondering if Han Fong would fail to show up again. She stared at the elevator, which had stopped working, then at the flight of stairs, contemplating whether to climb up to Han Fong's apartment. After a few moments, Hyuna decided to do just that, cursing Han Fong internally. If it weren't for the supplies, I wouldn't be looking for this bootlicker, she thought. After a few steps, Hyuna was trembling all over as she took a deep breath. She was exhausted, and after starving for several days, she had little strength left. Almost there, she whispered, encouraging herself as she continued forward, step by step. As she got closer to her destination, she noticed that the emergency lights up ahead were broken, plunging the entire section into darkness. She heard sounds ahead and questioned aloud if someone was there. Hyuna hesitated, unsure whether to return or continue, when she heard the sound of something being dropped. Before she could figure out what it was, a loud bam rang out. The emergency lights flickered back on, revealing that they hadn't been broken, just off momentarily. With the lights back on, Hyuna's condition was not pleasing to see. Her entire figure was covered in flour. She shouted, calling Han Fong's name. Han Fong appeared immediately at the scene, apologizing to Hyuna. He explained that he had fallen asleep and was rushing down the stairs when he saw her messages. In his haste, he ran into a railing and dropped the flour he was carrying. Hyuna was furious, asking if Han Fong was a pig and wondering why he couldn't even manage the simple task of carrying a bag of supplies properly. Feeling disgusted with her situation, Hyuna tried removing the pieces of black plastic from her hair. Han Fong, on the other hand, just stared at her, with a smug look on his face, satisfied that his plan had been executed perfectly. Han Fong had specially prepared that flour for her. He then offered the remaining supplies to Hyuna, who readily accepted them. As she opened the package to check its contents, she was displeased to find that all the food inside was moldy and inedible, like trash. Han Fong, scratching the back of his head nervously, explained that he had to eat carefully to keep the leftovers in stock, but couldn't preserve them for long, which was why they looked like that. Hyuna picked up a piece and asked if the supplies were even edible, noting how dirty they were. Han Fong, seeing her reaction, suggested that if she disliked them, she could return them. But Hyuna quickly pulled away with the bag of supplies in her hand, saying she never said she didn't want them. This didn't surprise Han Fong, who stared at her expressionlessly. Internally, he laughed. So, this is the goddess I was pursuing with all my might, he thought. Hyuna then took out a half-eaten apple and remarked that although the surface was blackened, the inside should be fine and edible after peeling it with a knife. She also requested the rest of the flour. Excited to find that half of it was still left, she eagerly accepted it. Amused, Han Fong watched her. From his perspective, the supplies were garbage, and he had never eaten such refuse in his previous life. He was confident that Hyuna would upset her stomach if she consumed the garbage he had given her. Additionally, the current low temperature made showering in this weather akin to flirting with death. This meant that the flour would be on Hyuna for a while. Han Fong considered this as he turned to leave. However, he soon felt something odd, like someone was watching him. In fact, someone wasn't just watching, but also following him. He quickly altered his route and decided to enter a floor to confront the culprit. As soon as he passed through the door, he hid behind it and waited patiently. Suddenly, the shadow of the pursuer appeared at the door, followed by a pair of boots. Han Fong acted swiftly, grabbing the person by the jacket and yanking them to the floor. "Seeking death?" he shouted, raising his fist, but then he froze. The person was a young girl. "Hey, are you following me? What are your intentions?" Han Fong demanded. The girl, however, just stared at him silently. Realizing she had no intention of answering, Han Fong decided to try scaring her into talking. He put on an old, creepy act and said in a deep voice, "Oh, you don't want to speak, huh? If you don't tell me, I'll strip you naked." He was disappointed when the girl continued to stare blankly, unaffected by his threats. Han Fong soon gave up and stood up, acknowledging that the young girl might be clueless and indifferent to his act. He told her to forget what happened and warned that this would be the only time he'd let her go scot-free. She should just go home and stop playing pranks by spying on people. As Han Fong took a step forward, he was surprised when the girl grabbed his jacket. Turning his head, he asked what she wanted. Still, she only stared at him. Annoyed, Han Fong told her to stop staring and just say what she wanted, or he would leave. He had neither the patience nor the luxury to figure out why she was spying on a complete stranger up the flight of stairs in the middle of the night, in such weather. This time, the girl simply pointed ahead of her, once again remaining silent. "Do you want me to come with you?" Han Fong asked, and the girl responded with a slight nod. Han Fong followed her, and they soon arrived at a door that could only be opened with authorization. A surveillance camera in the top right corner was also active. Han Fong was greatly surprised, wondering what was going on. Inside the apartment, which was spacious but cluttered with open boxes, clothes, and other items scattered everywhere, Han Fong asked, "Did you prepare all this?" The girl nodded again. At that moment, Han Fong realized the young girl might have known about the snowstorm, just as he did. He asked her if she knew there was going to be a snowstorm. The girl nodded and then spoke for the first time, explaining that she had predicted an ice age based on calculations and data analysis. She then displayed her monitor, showing the chat ID from the homeowner's chat group. Han Fong immediately recognized her. With a surprised expression, he asked if she was indeed the mysterious person from the chat group. Upon receiving confirmation, Han Fong was even more amazed. "But why did you bring me to your apartment? Was it just to talk about that?" The girl silently pointed to her numerous surveillance screens. Han Fong turned to look, and what he saw was beyond his wildest imagination. On the screen, surveillance footage captured every detail of his hoarding activities, every move from the elevator to his apartment door, including deliveries and conversations with Li Zi. His actions were laid bare in real time. In that moment, Han F. Feng felt a sense of violation. All his efforts to conceal his activities seemed laughable to this seemingly innocent girl. "Have you been spying on me?" he asked, feigning surprise. Without hesitation, the girl nodded. Strangely, she began undressing, leaving only her undergarments. Han Fong was dumbfounded, wondering why she would disrobe in front of a stranger. His embarrassment deepened and he blurted out, "Why are you suddenly taking off your clothes?" The girl, unfazed, calmly explained that she felt hot. "No," Han Fong corrected himself. "I meant stop. Put your clothes back on." It became evident that the girl lacked social norms. She quickly changed into more comfortable attire and sat down at her computer. Meanwhile, Han Fong grappled with the surreal turn of events. Deep in thought, Han Fong finally voiced his suspicion. "Were you spying on me because you noticed my hoarding behavior before the snowstorm?" The girl's nod confirmed his hunch. Curious, Han Fong pressed further. "So, your earlier approach and surveillance were to explore the possibility of cooperation between us?" Another nod followed her understanding of his question. Seeking clarity, he asked, "What kind of cooperation do you mean?" The girl calmly set aside her computer, then crawled on all fours across the sofa, oblivious to personal space. Her actions resembled those of a child. At the other end of the sofa, she revealed a mysterious box. Han Fong's panic surged. "What are you doing?" he blurted out. Undeterred, she gestured for him to teach her how to operate a generator. Patiently, Han Fong guided her through the steps until she could manage it herself. Then, she pointed towards something else. He demonstrated how to use the geyser device, emphasizing the need to close the valve after use. Finally, she indicated her foodstuffs. "Raw meat goes in the freezer," he instructed. "But remember to unpack it first. You're being too reckless." Struggling with the weight of the boxes, Han Fong implored the girl not to be a mere spectator, but to lend a helping hand. Once they finished, they moved to the kitchen. "Pay close attention to safety when connecting the gas," he instructed, emphasizing the importance of following his steps. "Check if the meal is ready," Han Fong continued. "If it's green, it's good to go." Only when there was sufficient gas could the flames roar and the dishes turn out delicious. With the meal prepared and steaming, he advised her to eat while it was still piping hot, a necessity in the current weather. Suddenly, all the pent-up frustration Han Fong had been harboring erupted. He slammed his hand on the table, feeling like an overworked babysitter. "Gosh," he muttered. "Your self-care skills need serious improvement." To his surprise, the girl merely stared and nodded in agreement. Han Fong quickly backtracked. Just kidding." Saying this, he began to eat his meal while simultaneously lamenting about how tired he was. This girl seemed like a full-time job, so he decided to address the situation before it spiraled out of control. Han Fong turned to her and said, "Let me make this clear. I will leave after eating." However, he was astonished to see that the girl had fallen asleep immediately after finishing her meal. "Wow, even I can't fall asleep while eating," he said in disbelief. Han Fong carefully lifted her sleeping figure and placed her on the sofa, then covered her with a blanket. After grabbing his jacket, he made a swift exit, remarking that the experience felt like he was raising a baby. The next morning, while Han Fong was still asleep, he heard a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found the young girl standing there with some boxes she had brought for him. Han Fong thanked her for her generosity, but he also sensed that she needed something from him. The girl had even wheeled her generator along and asked Han Fong to teach her how to operate it once more. They went to her apartment, and after a few days of interaction, Han Fong was convinced that the girl who lived upstairs from him was lacking in common sense, making living with her a nightmare. However, she did seem eager to learn about life. The problem was that Han Fong found himself dragged to her home every day to teach her just about everything. Her cooking skills, though still far from exceptional, had shown some improvement. Even so, with the quality of her meals, people would rush to eat it. But then again, Han Fong mused, under normal circumstances, even dogs might refuse it. At that moment, Han Fong realized he had never asked her name. When he finally did, she replied with a title that sounded like something out of a video game. The Evil King's True Eye Envoy. Han Fong wondered why he had even asked. The girl was a handful, displaying keen observational skills but lacking in survival instincts. The scene in the underground parking lot was utter chaos. People were fighting over resources, and it seemed the committee's efforts to maintain order had disintegrated. Homeowners were tearing each other apart for whatever scraps were left, their eyes gleaming with fierce determination. Despite their ragged and emaciated appearances, they fought relentlessly with iron rods and kitchen knives. Dark blood splattered on Glasses Man's clothes and shoes as a nearby neighbor was struck. The parking lot resembled a scene from hell, and Glasses Man, the only one not fighting for resources, watched the carnage unfold with a detached expression. Realizing he needed to restore some semblance of order, he took out a megaphone, turned it on, and emitted a deafening noise that momentarily drew everyone's attention. The sound was so overwhelming that everyone covered their ears. After taking a deep breath, he spoke up immediately. "Have you all had enough? Have you beaten each other senseless over the last few supplies?" As he spoke, he helped the man who had been smacked earlier to his feet. "Don't you think it's ridiculous that you're fighting like this over the remaining resources?" Hearing this, the plump man in glasses from earlier retorted, "You still have the nerve to say that? You're the one who proposed the donation of supplies. Now my family has only received a pack of instant noodles to last us a few days." Another voice chimed in, agreeing with Fatty in glasses. "Yes. If we don't grab the resources now, we'll starve to death." Glasses Man responded with a calm, convincing tone. "It seems I need to clarify things for everyone. The supplies that were distributed are insufficient, and the donated supplies are dwindling. Even if we grab the last bit of resources, it won't last long. So, as I said earlier, this is ridiculous. Do you really think you deserve to starve to death?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "Think carefully. Who caused this situation?" "You did." A voice from the crowd protested, but Glasses Man continued calmly. "It wasn't me. If you've forgotten, let me remind you. A loaf of bread that originally cost a few yuan is now being sold for dozens or even hundreds of yuan by those who had ample supplies." He picked up a piece of bread from the ground and crushed it in front of the crowd. In order to profit from you, a loaf of bread is even being auctioned off in 1/5 or 1/10 portions. They succeeded in making a fortune from this disaster at your expense. Not only have you spent all your money on this food, but you've also started an internal conflict over the last few supplies. Isn't that ridiculous? The ones who have more supplies but never donated are the same people who maliciously inflated prices. In the end, everyone present in the parking lot would be the ones to starve to death. Is that fair? Isn't uniting during this snowstorm the most important thing we can do? If it is, then why aren't we doing just that? Why don't we go up there and reclaim the supplies that rightfully belong to us? As Glasses Man finished his speech, a brief and complete silence fell over the crowd as they pondered his words. He was right. It wasn't fair. Why should they get all the benefits while the rest of them starve? The crowd began to be swayed by Glasses Man's words. All that was needed now was a little push to direct their anger towards the other homeowners with resources. And that's exactly what he provided. It's all their fault. They made us suffer like this. As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd united in attacking the homeowners who had sold their supplies or any who were suspected of hoarding and not donating. Damn it. It's not fair. We need to get our share of the supplies back. Yes, take back what belongs to us. Satisfied with how things were unfolding, a smile of triumph appeared on Glasses Man's face. He had successfully convinced the crowd to follow his lead. Meanwhile, among the crowd was Li Zi, who was gathering information for Han Feng. Seeing the chaos heading towards the homeowners with resources, he realized the situation was about to escalate dramatically. He needed to inform his brother immediately. With a serious expression, Li Zi took out his phone and texted Han Feng. Outside, the snowstorm showed no signs of letting up. The situation was as dire as before and seemed only to worsen. Meanwhile, inside Han Feng's apartment, he was passed out, oblivious to his phone dinging a few times. When he finally woke up to check the messages, he hoped it was from Li Zi. Indeed, it was. Li Zi warned Han Feng about the unfolding chaos in the underground parking lot. Brother, something terrible has happened. These people have lost their minds, he wrote. They're planning to raid the homeowners upstairs with supplies. Curious, Han Feng asked, who exactly Li Zi meant by they, and who was leading the charge? That guy named Zhang, Li Zi replied. He's inciting the others to rob the supplies. They're picking the locks of every apartment. Reading this, Han Feng sprang from his sofa, terrified. He immediately sought more details. Have they already started? Are they armed? Yes, they're all armed. Hide if you can, but avoid confronting them directly, Li Zi advised. Han Feng acknowledged the warning and told Li Zi to stay safe as well. He quickly checked his door locks to ensure they were secure and then moved to close the curtains. He hadn't expected things to escalate so drastically. Although he had 2 guns ready for such a crisis, the thought of an organized assault made the situation even more troubling. If his supplies were exposed, he would be confronted by every crazed neighbor. Han Feng feared that if that happened, everything he had hoarded would be consumed until nothing remained. He needed to prepare for this possibility. Grabbing some tools, 2 fire extinguishers, and a long cable, Han Feng immediately headed for his door. He attached the cables to the doorknob and completely insulated it using duct tape and an insulator. He then placed the 2 fire extinguishers near the door. As Han Feng began to uncoil the cable, the lights in his apartment went out, plunging the entire neighborhood into darkness. Soon, neighbors started complaining and questioning each other about the lack of electricity. With both water and electricity cut off and air conditioning or heating systems non-functional, the cold was genuinely life-threatening. The homeowners turned to the property management team for help, only to discover that there was no signal. They also realized that the surrounding buildings were in darkness as well. Han Feng observed the scene outside through his window. He knew that the snowstorm, combined with the overload on the electrical grid from heating demands, would lead to an inevitable power outage. The snow and low temperatures made equipment repairs impossible. Deciding to prepare for the worst, Han Feng turned to his home generator, which he had set aside for emergencies. He refueled it with gasoline, knowing that the power and internet outages might be permanent. When other homeowners finally understood that electricity would not be restored, panic would ensue. This panic could escalate into more serious riots, plunging the entire neighborhood into chaos and turning it into a scene reminiscent of the law of the jungle, a fight for survival. Half an hour earlier, Hyona had been fortunate enough to find a semblance of safety in the midst of this chaos. Now, she impatiently munched on a bowl of instant noodles. The man who had given her the meal explained that he had bought all his supplies from the homeowners in the group chat at 50 times the market price. Those poor fools were bragging about what a good deal they got. He had spent over 500,000 yuan on these supplies and had even auctioned off some of them, making a small profit from those desperate to buy. The man then touched Hyona's cheek and asked, "How about it? Are you willing to follow me?" Recognizing the need to play along, Hyona nodded in agreement, confirming the man's belief that as long as he had supplies, he could do whatever he wanted with her. But at that moment, noises began coming from outside his apartment door. He soon realized someone was trying to pick his lock. Frustrated, he wondered, who could be making such a racket in the middle of the night? Completely unaware that the neighbors had decided to raid his supplies. He heard the murmurs of the homeowners on the other side of the door, plotting to break into his apartment, and wondering if it was indeed the place of the person who had bought all their supplies. When lockpicking failed, they resorted to kicking the door. With a final crash, the door gave way, sending a jolt of fear through the man as he stared in disbelief. At the entrance stood the homeowners, their hungry faces illuminated by the dim light, armed and ready.
Meanwhile, in Han Feng's apartment, he had managed and succeeded to get his generator working. Several cables connected to it were powering his entire apartment. The generator, designed for indoor use, was housed in a soundproof container, making it conveniently silent and preventing any noise from drawing attention. To ensure his apartment remained unnoticed, Han Feng had also turned off all the lights. However, he now faced a new challenge at his door. Han Feng was attempting, with growing frustration, to turn his door handle into an electrified conductor. After all his hard work, he was puzzled and disappointed when a simple test revealed that there was no power. Strange, he muttered to himself, bewildered. Why is there no power? At that moment, his setup exploded in his face. Fortunately, the explosion wasn't large, and Han Feng was unharmed. As the smoke settled, a cable fell to the ground, emitting visible sparks. Han Feng picked up the cable and blew the smoke off it, wondering why the setup was proving so difficult when it seemed straightforward in the videos he had watched before. It would be great if there was internet, he thought. Suddenly, a knock on his door startled him. Wondering who it might be, Han Feng peered through the peephole and was surprised to see a familiar figure with what he described as stupid hair. Han Feng questioned the girl, asking what business she had with him. Hearing this, the girl responded with a single word, "Help!" Han Feng sighed, finding the situation troublesome, especially since he was preoccupied. He reached for the door handle, intending to open the door, but he stopped abruptly, remembering a similar encounter that had led to his death in a previous life. After a moment of careful thought, he released the door handle. "Well," he said hesitantly, "I heard that some homeowners have started breaking into houses and stealing supplies. So, go back quickly. I won't open the door for you." The girl let out a heavy sigh and began knocking on the door. After a while, she stopped when she realized Han Feng had no intention of opening it. With no other options, she sat on the cold, hard floor outside the door, shivering violently. She struggled to keep herself from freezing, doing everything she could to survive. Then, she heard murmurs, not far to her left. It was a group of homeowners discussing the urgency of raiding the current floor before others arrived. One of them wondered aloud how many residents were still home on this floor, but another dismissed the concern. "Who cares? We'll just raid them one by one." A hand appeared from around the corner, and soon the group of homeowners came into view. They were indeed raiding other residents for supplies. One of them remarked that it seemed they were in luck since no one had raided this floor yet. They paused to assess the situation, trying to determine which apartments were still occupied. "The two households over there belong to us, so let's try the rest," one of them said. They approached Han Fong's door and prepared to pry it open with a crowbar. "Hello? Is anyone home? Hello? We're here to deliver supplies," one of them called out. Inside the apartment, just behind the door, Han Fong sat on the floor, his hand tightly covering the girl's mouth. Outside, a loud rattling noise persisted as the intruders tried to force the door open. Han Fong whispered to reassure the girl, telling her not to be afraid. "My door is reinforced," he said softly. But the girl, surprisingly, showed no signs of panic. The intruders tried the door handle several times and even attempted to kick it open, but to no avail. "Why is this door so strong?" one of them grumbled. "Even the handle won't break, no matter how hard we kick it." "You're right, big brother," another replied. "Maybe we should try the house next door first." Out of options, they agreed, and decided to mark Han Fong's door for later. Hearing this, Han Fong felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was glad they had finally given up and grateful that he had focused on reinforcing his door and handle when he had the chance. Back then, he had insisted the contractor add a 5 cm steel plate inside the door and reinforce the handle. Now, that decision was paying off. Then his eyes widened in alarm as he suddenly realized he might have suffocated the girl. So he hurriedly said sorry to her and quickly moving his hand away, saying, "It's okay now," because he just didn't want them to realize someone was home. So suddenly Han Fong was interrupted when the girl, now free to speak, thanked him and assured him that she was fine. They stayed in their positions for a while longer, listening for any signs of the intruders. After what felt like an eternity, Han Fong whispered that he believed the homeowners had left. Relieved, he turned back to his project, muttering to himself as he worked to get his electrifying contraption functioning, swearing that just wait until he fixed that thing and say, "If anyone tries to kick his door again," he remarks that he electrocute them to death. While the Become seems curious about what he was doing, so she asked him to explain. As a response, Han Fong said that it's a defense mechanism, an electric shock trap. But then he remembered the girl didn't even understand basic survival skills. How could she grasp his complicated setup? "Oh, that's right," he added, almost to himself, that she still wouldn't understand, even if he explained it. And he don't even understand why this damn electric shock device is so difficult to set up. Frustrated, he continued tinkering. What Han Fong didn't expect was what happened next. The girl calmly spoke up, explaining his project back to him. "The anti-theft device relies on the difference between electric current and voltage," she said with a knowing expression. While Han Fong bewildered and shocked after hearing it, asking her if she know those stuff, the girl nodded as a respond and say that, "It's quite simple if he know what he is doing," she replied, then began explaining to him the procedure step by step. After cutting the power, the bare wires needed to be wrapped around the door handle to insulate them. Next, the ground wire from the distribution box was connected to the door handle. Finally, the power was turned back on. When Han Fong restored the electricity, he tested his setup, and it was a success. Wow, it worked. It was really successful, he marveled. How did she know this? "The evil king's true eye has the ability to see all the truths in the world," the girl responded. Hearing this, Han Fong wondered why he had even bothered to ask. After finishing his work, he gathered the remaining cables in his toolbox. He told the girl that if she needed help settling in, she should let him know. He waited for a reply, but when she remained silent, he reminded her that he was asking a question. The girl calmly unpacked the items she had hidden under her jacket and replied that the evil king's true eye will decide to reside there. At first, her words didn't register in Han Fong's mind. But after a moment, when he finally understood what the girl meant, he shouted, demanding to know what she meant by what she had just said. He insisted that she must be joking and declared, absolutely not. He didn't want it to happen and told her she was not allowed to stay there. Unbeknownst to Han Fong, the cable coiled around his left arm, slipped and fell at his feet. In the middle of his outburst, he took a step forward to approach the girl. His foot caught in the coiled cable, causing him to trip and crash headfirst into the table in front of him with a loud bang. As the dust settled, Han Fong groaned, complaining that the fall hurt like hell. Then, almost immediately, he noted that the pain wasn't as bad as he expected. His body, which should have been aching from colliding with the table, felt perfectly fine, almost as if he had fallen onto the floor rather than the table. Unnoticed by Han Fong, his hands were glowing purple. His attention, however, was focused on his coffee table. Huh? My coffee table, he murmured. Han Fong moved closer and picked it up, realizing it felt like cloth in his hands. The table's molecular structure seemed to have changed drastically. It was then that Han Fong noticed his purple glowing hand. Huh? Purple light? Could it be that this purple light transformed the coffee table into this? He wondered. He looked around and realized that everything his hand had directly touched, the toolboxes and various scattered items, had the same outcome as the coffee table. He picked up a hammer from the toolbox, only to find it bending like lightweight rubber. This purple light, can it make objects soft? Han Fong wondered aloud in amazement. But then he remembered he wasn't alone in the apartment. That's right. He had a guest, he thought nervously, while he was sweating there. Meanwhile, the girl had watched the entire scene without uttering a word, as she always did. She was confused and speechless about what she had just witnessed. This is the end of the video. Please continue to support our channel. Thank you, everyone. See you in the next chapter.